Hello and welcome to episode 146 of AviaDev Insight Africa, the podcast offering a window to the world of African aviation with your host, John Howell, CEO and founder of AviaDev Africa. Today, we have a slightly different format for you in that I'm bringing in a very special co-host in the form of Tom Cock, director of the AviAssist Foundation. Now, AviaDev Africa and AviAssist have a long-established relationship which stretches back to when AviaDev was born in Kigali in Rwanda back in 2016 and 2017. We held a couple of our events there. And today we're going to talk about the really important topic of safety in African aviation. And we've got an incredible special guest joining us with huge experience across the continent and beyond. So I will not take any more time. I'm going to pass over to Tom now, who is going to introduce AviAssist for those of you who are not aware, and of course, introduce today's special guest. So Tom, over to you.
Thanks so much, John. Well, great to be here on the AviaDev podcast, a co-production, I would say, today, AviaDev and AviAssist. So briefly, indeed, the AviAssist Foundation is the only non-profit organization that promotes aviation safety in Africa, and we do that since 1995. But as you said, John, we're not here to talk about AviAssist. We're here to talk and dig into the brain of our guest for today, Sakhile Reiling. So Sakhile, it's great to have you with us here. If people want to have an idea of what you are all about, they can, of course, visit your LinkedIn profile, which we'll post below this podcast. And if they go there, they can see you've had a very rich career. You know, your CV includes the roles of a commercial pilot, flight operations inspector at the Botswana, then still the Botswana Department of Civil Aviation, to CEO of Air Botswana, and now as a board member of the Botswana Civil Aviation Authority. Still type rated on ATR aircraft, and a simulator instructor and an examiner on those. But of course, those LinkedIn things only tell part of the story, because there's also a person, Sakhile. And so we're very keen to get a little bit of an insight into you as a person outside your profession. So what we usually ask people is, can you tell us what your favorite book is and why that book is your favorite book?
Okay, thank you very much. And it's wonderful to be here with you today. You're quite right. Anyone who wants to know about my professional life can find most of it on LinkedIn. So let's not dwell on that. But that doesn't define me. It's what I do. And you're asking about my favorite book. There are so many, I don't know which one to choose. But at the moment, I've just finished Becoming by Michelle Obama. And it's absolutely beautifully written. I don't want to sound as if I'm selling the book on behalf of anybody, but I really did enjoy it. And what I loved the most about it is obviously the style of writing. It's just absolutely brilliant. It's very well written. But the messages and so on in there are also things that I think anybody can admire and identify with and so on. In particular, the message about resilience and continuing to do your thing no matter what else is going on. I mean, she really went to town in sharing quite a lot of herself and her family and all the things. It's a memoir. There's no doubt about that. But it doesn't come across as sort of like, I'm the greatest and all that. No, it comes across as really, really human, and it's not an easy road, and don't give up. It's absolutely brilliant.
Okay, well, fantastic. I mean, I have been passing it in the bookshop thinking to buy it, but your sales pitch certainly will make it on my Christmas list. So thanks for that. Now, just another small insight into your person as outside of professional life. I asked you before, and if you want to have dinner, if you could have dinner with one person who you find very inspiring, just to have a good inspirational evening, who would that person be?
Oh no, that's too easy. You have to ask me something much harder than that. It has to be the Obamas, but I'd have to bring both of them in, because I honestly think, they've written a lot and we've all read a lot, but I think if you're in a dinner setting and it's less formal, you get to know the people behind, the public persona and the public facade and all that. And I honestly think that both of them are just amazing human beings who've actually borne quite a lot without whinging and moaning about it. And I think that would be a very nice dinner date.
Good evening.
I'd have to invite 2 or 3 other people though, because I'm interested in, the way they implement strategy.
Okay.
The way, for example, would be the support system for the most important job in the world, arguably, and the road to that, which clearly wasn't easy for anyone. And then the conversation has to turn to what's next.
Okay. Well, I mean, maybe we can devote another episode to this one day, John, about the books of people that are in aviation, African aviation. But as John said, of course, AviAssist is all about safety. So let's gently move on to the topic of safety. When we were talking before, some time ago, actually, you also spoke about, in terms of safety training, how you've seen that there's a lot of learning going on in African aviation safety, but perhaps too little experiencing. Now that resonated with me because safety experiences is one of the 3 goals of the Foundation's AviAssist Safety Promotion Center in Rwanda, next to learning and research. So can you tell me a little bit more about what you mean when you say that there should be more experiencing when it comes to safety promotion? Okay,
so one of the reasons I agreed to work with you both today is because of that particular passion in the safety story. It is a favorite part of my life at the moment, and I'm glad to have the opportunity to basically share some of the things that I've seen on the ground. I'll stay with Africa because that's really what this podcast is about. And I've worked with very many operators and regulators in Africa. And what I find is that we're very good at providing basic knowledge. Everybody has received particular types of training. There are many things we can do, I think, to make the training more accessible and perhaps more exciting for many of the recipients of that training. But the implementation is way behind. Now, you and I will recall that when we last spoke, I suggested a number of ways in which this might actually be solved over the long term. And this is important. It is a long-term effort. It's not something that we can change overnight. So you've got the embedded knowledge on the one hand, and now you want people to implement that and actually get safety management systems and risk management procedures to work in their own environments, and somehow that's not happening. A lot of that is because it's one thing to pass a written exam. It's something completely different to see that being brought to life. Now, we also spoke about the kind of training culture, if you will, that encourages people to travel just for the sake of traveling.
Yeah.
The kind of abuses that then, perhaps come out of that. I wouldn't want this to be part of it, but I think one way in which people could gain experience is actually by secondment to other operators. And I don't even want to say like operators or similar operators, any other operators. The principles are the same.
And I think where you mentioned the fact that, this international travel might be stopping countries from building up national capabilities. In that respect, I mean, we're of course in the middle of this Corona crisis, which has forced many of us to go to online platforms, including this very podcast, actually, which has long preceded Corona, I should say. But do you think that in that respect, the ease and the necessity for us to use online tools will help us emancipate, if you like, that safety training? People now seem to accept that, well, I can't travel to Singapore or Montreal, so I really have to do something online?
Yes, I do. And I think while we're there, all it's done is accelerate what we all knew we had to do anyway. We all knew that what we were doing was inefficient and unsustainable. And we also realized that it was quite expensive and didn't give us what we wanted out of it, which is the learning and the knowledge retention that we want organizations to foster. Of course, we knew that. So now with this, we can definitely collaborate better. We can bring more online. We can make the training sexier, actually, and more accessible. And in that way, perhaps bring a greater depth to it. So the training, as we discussed before, is one aspect of it. It's that fourth pillar of the promotion of safety management systems that ICAO gave us. And it goes a long way to laying a foundation. But in order for this to succeed, we have to build on that foundation. And it's that part that I think still needs a lot of support from all of us. I'm in. I know you.
You're in, and it has to be done nationally, indeed, I think, as well.
Yeah.
I thought it was quite shocking. There's a very interesting research paper from a Tanzanian institution called Twaweza, which looked into how the allowance system distorts, and sometimes they say even destroys capacity, not specifically in the aviation sector. But from that piece of research, it became clear that in Tanzania, and this was about a decade ago already, they spent $390 million on allowances. Wow. And that's one of the things which I think President Magufuli changed when he came into power, to really try and move away from that automatic reliance on international capacity building. So indeed, very interesting to see how we can try and move away from that. Like you said, I think also by making safety training more interesting, because traditionally, I think, safety training can be quite boring. So we really have to work. Yeah, that's just a fact, I think. We have to work harder, be more ingenious in that respect. And that's something we're really trying to push in the center in Rwanda, the AviAssist Safety Promotion Center, and hopefully in 2 other centers we'll build in the next decade in West Africa and Southern Africa.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, Tom, because I recall when CRM was introduced for flight deck crew, it then developed into, threat crew resource management.
Yeah, I was about to say CRM.
Yeah, I'm sorry. And it was such a new concept, and it met with so much resistance. And today it's the buzzword because of the resilience of those people charged with making sure that it works, but also because we have been able to demonstrate what happens when it doesn't work and what happens when it is not taken seriously. And I'd like to suggest that those are the conversations that we need to be having about safety management systems. What is it that it's supposed to do? What is it that happens when you don't do that? Yeah. What happens if you only do part of it? And can you afford to not do it at all? I mean, at the moment, we've got sort of halfway houses in many parts of Africa that still need a little bit of development. And I'd like to be there for that.
Can I just jump in here, Tom? Just quick.
Yeah, of course. Go ahead, John.
I just wanted to pick up on something that you both were talking about, which is the application of the training, which of course we all know in whatever you do, you can learn to be a bus driver in a classroom, but if you never drive a bus, you're not going to be a good bus driver. Same thing, with anything, it needs practical application. And the thing that caught my ear was your conversation about collaboration and almost an exchange, that these people can get experience in completely different operations, be it cargo or business jets or whatever. Just go and have experience. So my question is, whose job is it to facilitate that collaboration? Is that an association? Is that the airlines themselves? Is that the individuals? Where does that sit? Or where could it sit? And who should be taking the lead with that, I suppose?
Sakhile, you want to have a go at that first?
Yeah, I have 2 hearts on the matter. The first one is that there's quite a lot of possibilities for collaboration within the existing infrastructure. For example, those airlines that are members of IATA could obviously, do what they have to do in that regard. Then there's AFRA, then there's AFRASCO, then there's ARSA, and BASA. There's so many associations. But actually, as far as I know, we haven't got there yet. We really haven't got there yet. And I therefore think that work needs to be started by the likes of you two, to basically say to the existing players, have you considered making it possible for airlines to gain experience, or any other operators come to that, to gain experience in particular systematic strategic management of SMSs by providing opportunities for collaboration under certain conditions?
I think also we this may be a nice bridge to a next topic, but I think there we can also really benefit from what we at the foundation like to call the safety cheetahs. This is a concept we've taken from George Aitai, a famous economist from Ghana. And basically these are youngsters between 25 and 35 years of age who are really keen to move forward, and also in many ways for the first time in Africa have quite often an opportunity to change careers. So in other words, if we don't just look at the payment of people, but also look at making the job interesting, which partially is a practical exposure and learning by doing, then these youngsters leave our industry, because for the first time, if you're in air traffic control in Uganda and you may get a good salary perhaps, but your job is not very interesting and there's no career prospects, you can then decide to move to work for KPMG, do something in the IT sector, etc. So that's really changed it. So there's a new generation, perhaps. Have you seen those sort of safety cheetahs sort of rise up around you, Sakhile, recently?
I have actually. In fact, I gave a talk at Dare to Dream Foundation this past week, at which I advocated exactly what you're saying by noting that very many technical people, myself included, of course, at some stage, don't really have a clear career path. And most operations and operators don't make provision for that. And we're so stuck in the idea that only academically qualified people who hold degrees or whatever should hold particular positions. So much so that there is no bridge between technical expertise and good leadership. So how do you take a pilot and turn them into an effective leader?
Yeah.
And help them to feed into the safety value chain and to be in charge of the safety management system in the area of the organization where they work? Those are the questions that I wanted to answer them. And look, I'll be honest, it's a work in progress, but work has been done. And I know that there are collaborative efforts with some universities to actually create the bridge that's required. In my own particular case, I left the cockpit and I went to DCA as a principal flight operations inspector. And I very quickly realized how out of my depth I was. It wasn't going to work. Nothing. The last 15 years had prepared me for management, desk work, and any of those things.
Yeah.
And the leadership capacity that I had was, of course, what was presented to me in the context of a flight, which you can describe as a project, finite beginning, finite end, very, very identifiable milestones and members and so on. So there was nothing there that I could build on. I literally had to stop that and go back. And that's why I didn't end it.
And then I think what's also interesting, of course, is now we're speaking about the transition from a pilot to an inspector, which is perhaps a somewhat more common thing. But John and I, AviaDev and AviAssist, have also been really working and making clear to African, future professionals that yes, you can become a pilot in aviation and an air traffic controller, but there are so many more fantastic careers out there.
Yes.
You can also earn a really nice living, but also there, if you think, for example, of the ground handling, we've had these same discussions. So it would be interesting to hear your views on that, where they also say there are very few career paths. If you start with a ground handler loading luggage into a plane, quite often there's no view as to where that person could be in 5 or 10 years from now. There's a high turnover in staff there as well, but that partially has to do, perhaps, what do you think, with this lack of career path?
I think it's damaging. I'll be honest, I think it is damaging, but I also think that it is relatively easy to identify the various career paths that could be followed by people in every single discipline, whether it's a firefighter or a cargo person or a dispatcher or ground handling, loading, all that. All those have got interlinkages that we've been reluctant to acknowledge in the past. And I think as long as we start to marry them and create chains, even building blocks of knowledge over which people can step while they build their career, they will always, in each building block, be asked to work with the safety aspect of things and therefore add to the value chain. You cannot have successful strategy implementation if you ignore the safety mandate or if you ignore personnel growth.
So basically, we're coming towards the end of this broadcast, but basically I think what we then could say, if I sum up what you've been saying and what our discussion has been about, is that perhaps an important part of safety promotion from now onwards is also not, first of all, to make it more interesting, the safety promotion more interesting, the training and more practical, but also indeed look at a more mature career development, career path for people, human resource management, if you like, as opposed to just personnel management. Would that be a fair summary?
I think that's part of it. Can I add to that, please?
Yeah, of course.
I'd like to introduce the concept of systems thinking, because if you don't manage in accordance with systems thinking, you develop silos which never integrate and never ever give you what you want, and you're always on the back foot. In the context of safety, you're always reacting to things that have already happened that you really wish hadn't happened. Whereas if you set up systems, then you are able to risk manage and be proactive and even predictive in order to make your business more successful. Whether you're talking about route development, or you're talking about pilot training, or you're talking about making the load sheet electronic instead of doing the manual thing, you will always have to fall back on systems management. And for those people that want to know more about that, I would actually like to recommend a book.
Yes, I remember that. I was about to say, because there was a book you also came across, which really inspired you. What was that book again?
Okay, the book is by Peter Senge. I'm sorry, I didn't bring it with me. It's by Peter Senge. It's not a new book, but there have been many editions as things have improved. And it's called The Fifth Discipline.
The Fifth Discipline, that's in number 5.
Yeah, The Fifth Discipline. I really recommend that. It will start you on a journey you hadn't anticipated, because you will read it thinking, oh, okay, just another general management book. Sure, as far as the first 4 disciplines are concerned. But then we start introducing the systems, and suddenly you are creating a business that is self-healing, as well as a business that puts itself in a position to preempt issues. And I think that's where your intelligence comes in, and that's where you can create a competitive advantage while still delivering whatever it is you have to deliver and looking after the growth of your personnel.
And it also links really good in closing with the current world of safety promotion, which is to never think of things as a human mistake, but to look for a systematic error, because quite often, yes, there might be a human factor involved, but very often there is systematic issues wrong in the boardroom, so many organizations, which if we don't repair those defenses, as they're called in aviation safety, then our system still will not be functioning as safe as we would like to. Well, fantastic. Sakhile, thanks so much for your time today. I think it was really nice to get those insights, especially also based on your long and established career, with all these nice nuggets of career bits in there. So I certainly hope that the foundation and AviAssist can continue working with you in the future on safety promotion and other things, because I think, John, there's also quite some strategic stuff in here which would equally apply for route development or other parts of our aviation industry, looking outside of this silo of safety, because that's indeed danger for us to be in. John, back to you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, you said, and we set out to obviously make safety interesting, make it sexy, etc. I think that some of the concepts you've talked about are just brilliant. I love the idea of the systems thinking and joining everything together and not operating in silos, because it's what we talk about all the time. We've talked about it already, about collaboration and knowledge sharing. We're going to benefit by working together. And I think that this unprecedented, horrendous experience that we're going through is, of course, forcing that collaboration. I wouldn't say naturally it was coming, but it should be coming back faster now. We don't need to build back to what we had. We need to think about things in a new way. And anybody who says any different, I think, is misguided in terms of that. I would also say, Sakhile, you mentioned it as well, but and Tom too, we've all done work with some of these fantastic non-profits. So Dare to Dream, I know Captain Fatsima, Girls Fly Program for Africa, and Refilway down there in South Africa.
Future Aviation Professionals in Rwanda.
Future Aviation Professionals in Rwanda. I Fly in Port Elizabeth down in South Africa. These guys are the people we need to rally around and support where we can, because they're going to inspire this next generation who need to be shown that there are multiple ways of kind of progressing your career, but we need that laser focus on safety. So what I will do is I'll put the links to your LinkedIn profiles in the show notes. So anybody listening who wants to get in touch with Sakhile and keep abreast of their developments, then the links will be in the show notes. And I just want to say thank you to everybody out there for taking the time to listen today. As always, all that we ask in terms of repayment is that you click that share button now and you share this episode with one person in your network, either on WhatsApp, on LinkedIn, on some other social media, and send it to them and say, hey guys, you should have a listen to this. And if you really feel generous, please do also leave us a review in the App Store, and we will be back for the next episode very soon. So all that remains is to say thank you so much, Sakhile and Tom, for doing this. And I'm sure our relationship will continue from here, and we'll support each other and continue in the spirit of collaboration. So thank you both, and we'll see you all very soon.
Thank you, guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.